Hope can get you through the darkest of times. Hope can give you the perseverance you need to endure deprivation and suffering until you reach nourishment. Hope can be crucial to resilience, but hope can also make you passive. It can make you not take the action you need as you sit around hoping for some better outcome, hoping for someone else to save you, someone else to rescue you. Or hope can raise your expectations just to be dashed on the harsh rocks of reality, so that you go up with hope and come crashing down in despair and hopelessness. Hope has this ambiguity in it, this double meaning. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. In the process of gathering the materials for this podcast episode and doing the reading and the research, I came to change my view of hope. I'll talk about that at the end. I'm wondering, as we go through this, is if you change your perspective on hope as well. Some of the questions we'll address in this episode. Is there a way to discern between hope that's beneficial and hope that's harmful, what some people call a false hope? And can you cultivate hope? Is that something you're born with, or you just have, or just have to accept or jump into the void? Or are there things you can do to actually cultivate a sense of hope? Today on Resilience in Dark Times, hope, blessing or curse. Welcome to Resilience in Dark Times. I'm your companion and guide, Michael Glavin. If you're feeling overwhelmed by political upheaval and environmental crisis, you're in the right place. This podcast is for everyone who refuses to normalize injustice or ignore planetary emergencies. Together, we'll transform anxiety into action and build the emotional resilience we need to keep fighting. Let's begin. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is about you and what you're needing. So I'm glad you're taking this time for yourself to reflect on hope with me, to sort through these issues. And I hope that by the end of it, you have a better sense of hope and how to access hope in a really meaningful way that's going to improve your life. And that's what this podcast is all about, is helping you cultivate resilience. And hope, I think, is an important element in that resilience. When I thought about this show and this episode on hope, I immediately thought of the myth of Pandora's box. And I remember when I was younger and I heard about the myth, if you're not familiar with it, it's from Greek mythology. And Pandora is given this box and she's told not to open it, but she's so curious that she eventually opens it and releases all the horrors and plagues of humanity, all the suffering, death and disease and famine and everything. But then at the end, hope is in the box. It's the last thing in the box. And when I was growing up, I heard that story as, well, that makes up for all the other things. Hope is what makes those difficulties, those sufferings bearable. But then as I got older, I went to college, I heard there was another reading that hope was actually the final curse. That's why hope was in the box, was because it was a curse along with all the others, and that hope kind of made all the other ones worse. And that reading intrigued me. So getting ready for this episode, I searched out for the ambiguous version. And first I found all these sort of childhood versions of the story where hope at the end is a butterfly or a dragonfly, and it comes out and it makes everything all okay because you have hope. Because despite all the sufferings and trials and tribulations, we have hope, and hope can help us endure and persevere through the difficulties. I think that's a good message for kids. I think that's an important orientation towards life. But that's not what I was interested in. I was interested in the original story and what was meant. So I went back and I searched and I found the first mentions of the myth that were written down, because this was, told orally for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And there was someone named, I'm going to butcher the name, Hesiod. And Hesiod wrote down a lot of the myths in two locations. He talks about Pandora. And I read the original, and wow, it is misogynistic. I don't use that term lightly. It's not just seeing women as not equals or putting them down a little bit. It's pretty awful. I will put a link in the show notes if you're interested in exploring it. But to give you a little background on the story, so it's set within the Greek mythological world. And in that world, Prometheus steals fire from the gods. And Prometheus gives this fire to humans. At this time, human is all just men. There are no women. Women do not exist, even though there are female gods. But this is mythology, so okay, we'll let it slide. So Zeus is really upset at Prometheus for stealing fire. And so Zeus wants to get back at Prometheus. But Prometheus hears this prophecy, accept no gifts from Olympus. So accept no gifts from the gods because something bad is coming. So if a package shows up and it comes from Mount Olympus, just send it back unopened. That's his advice. That's his orientation. That's how he's keeping himself safe. But he has a brother, Epimetheus, and the brother forgets this prophecy, and so Zeus targets the brother. What he does is he creates this creature, and that creature is the first woman. So he gets all the gods to come together and endow this woman with all these different gifts. She can make crafts, she can sing, she looks beautiful, she's irresistible. He also says a lot of nasty things about what they put into this creature. A lying tongue and a wicked heart and but they also give her an insatiable curiosity. And so Prometheus' brother marries this woman who they call Pandora, which means gifted one, because all the gods gave her these gifts. They also gave her a dowry. The dowry is a jar, and then the jar is filled with things. And what the gods do, they stuff the jar with all these sort of evil spirits of death and suffering and famine and disease and you name it, everything that's bad is in the jar. So that's the setup. So let's turn to the actual text, and I'll read some of the text now. And you'll get the story as it was first written down. This is from Hesiod's Works and Days. Finally, when he'd completed his inescapable trap, irresistible to men, Father Zeus sent out Hermes, the watchdog slayer, to Epimetheus. The swift messenger of the gods brought the gift, but Epimetheus only considered in hindsight Prometheus's forewarning. Never accept gifts from Olympian Zeus. Send everything back. Don't bring it into your house, for I fear mortals will suffer for it. Only after Epimetheus accepted the gift, after he held suffering in his arms, did he understand. Before, all men across the earth used to prosper free from suffering, hard work, and painful disease. For men, these are death bringers, because those who weather these evils become old before their time. Then the woman, Pandora, removed the heavy lid of the jar with her own hands, and driven by her own thoughts, unleashed sorrows for men, death bringers. Hope alone remained in its unbreakable home, caught underneath the lid of the jar. Its escape was only a short flight away, but just in time she slammed the lid down, all according to the plan of aegis-bearing, cloud-gathering Zeus. Now 10,000 or more sorrows roam free among all mankind. Suffering is inescapable on land and sea. Worse, diseases stalk human beings day and night, spreading everywhere out of control. For men, they bring wails of grief. So there's not that much there. It's pretty brief. So in the original, it's not a box, it's a jar, and then later it's mistranslated to mean box, and that's what sticks in the collective imagination of people. And hope doesn't get let out. Hope gets stuck in the lid. So why is hope the last thing in there? Why does it stay in the jar? And is hope a blessing or a curse? Is hope one of the evils that was put in the jar? Or is it meant to offset all the evils? Let's start with the cynical reading. Let's turn to Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorites, who is also a Greek scholar. So he studied the Greeks, And so he is very familiar with the mythology and very familiar with this text. He writes an aphorism, which is a short paragraph on Pandora and this myth. So this is what he says. It's in A Book for Free Spirits, Human All Too Human. And it's aphorism number 71. And it's short, but I'll read it in its entirety. Hope. Pandora brought the jar with the evils and opened it. It was the god's gift to man. On the outside, a beautiful, enticing gift called the lucky jar. Then all the evils, those lively, winged beings, flew out of it. Since that time, they roam around and do harm to men by day and night. One single evil had not yet slipped out of the jar. As Zeus had wished, Pandora slammed the top down and it remained inside. So now man has the lucky jar in his house forever and thinks the world of the treasure. It is at his service. He reaches for it when he fancies it. For he does not know that the jar which Pandora brought was the jar of evils, and he takes the remaining evil for the greatest worldly good. It is hope. For Zeus did not want man to throw his life away, no matter how much the other evils might torment him, but rather to go on letting himself be tormented anew. To that end he gives man hope. In truth, it is the most evil of evils, because it prolongs man's torment. Ouch. That is Nietzsche for you. Always challenging, always sobering, cuts to the heart of things, doesn't mess around. So this is the cynical reading of this myth. And I think Nietzsche's correct here. In the myth, Zeus wants mankind to suffer. And so hope adds to the suffering of men, as Nietzsche is saying. Right? Think about the ancient Greeks and their view of fate. If fate is something you cannot escape, then hope makes you try to escape it, which just makes it happen. It sort of ensures the suffering. Hope ensures the suffering of man. Just think about Oedipus. If you're familiar with Oedipus, the story of Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, that's a myth that Sophocles makes popular in a play. And so it was prophesied that Oedipus would kill his father and sleep with his mother, wed his mother. And so he tries to escape his fate. And so he leaves the town that he's born in, where he thinks his parents are, goes to a different city altogether, and then winds up fulfilling that destiny, that fate, even though he tries to escape it. He had hope of not fulfilling that, and so he left, and then he wound up unwittingly creating the prophecy. He fulfilled the prophecy by leaving, by trying to escape his fate. Spoilers, sorry. I think Nietzsche's correct on the intention of Zeus and the intention of this original myth, what it meant for the Greeks at that time. That if everything's predestined, if your threads of your life, your fate is woven into the fabric already before you were born, then hope is superfluous. Then hope is empty. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't help in any way except to get expectations up, which then are not met. The word in question for what is left in the box is elpis or elpis. I don't know. I don't speak ancient Greek. And so one interpretation is calling it hope, but another interpretation is expectation or false expectation or hopeful expectation, positive expectation of the future. So that's the curse. The curse is that thinking that things will be better than they actually are. And that gap then leads to suffering. That increases the suffering. That's how Zeus traps humans into suffering. It prolongs their suffering because they have hope. Hope then is a manipulation. Hope is manipulated by Zeus to ensure the suffering of people. I think there's some weight to that interpretation, to that version of the story and that side of hope. Hope can increase our suffering. There are certainly times when that is true. If we're going to talk about hope, if hope means anything, if hope is worth its weight in salt. Hope needs to have some value, even in the most darkest, desperate circumstances. Like, that's where my mind goes, because otherwise, it will give out. Like, we need to test it. It needs to be tested in the most rigorous conditions, the most awful conditions. For this episode, and in these times, my mind keeps going back to Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, his book, where he talks about his experience in 3 different concentration camps. I'll be talking about that a little bit later, but right now my mind goes to the German saying that was over the entrance to the concentration camps, which was Arbeit macht frei, which is translated into work makes one free, or work sets you free. Now remember, the concentration camps were started out as labor camps. And so the myth, the lie was, if you keep your head down, do your work, you will eventually be let go. This was not true. This was a lie, but the Nazis used the hope of getting out of the camp to try to keep people passive, to try to have them not rebel, to go along with things, to try to not escape. The Nazis used hope against people. They tried to manipulate them with a false hope, a false sense of hope, to make people passive. And this is a threat. This is a danger of hope, that if we have false hope, if we hope for something, especially if it's something outside of our control, it can make us passive. It can make us blind to what we can actually be doing in the here and now to improve our conditions, to improve things, to make a positive outcome more likely. I'd say that's the first danger of hope, that it can make us passive. The second danger of hope is that it can raise our expectations. And so then when that thing doesn't come to pass, we can fall into despair and hopelessness. And then we wind up worse off than we were before we had hope. Viktor Frankl talks about this in the concentration camp. A friend of his had a dream where he would be released on a specific date. And that date came and went, and then he fell deeply ill and died shortly thereafter. Let me read from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Those who know how close the connection is between the state of mind of a man, his courage and hope, or lack of them, and the state of immunity of his body will understand that the sudden loss of hope and courage can have a deadly effect. The ultimate cause of my friend's death was the expected liberation did not come, and he was severely disappointed. This suddenly lowered his body's resistance against the latent typhus infection. His faith in the future and his will to live had become paralyzed, and his body fell victim to illness. The observations of this one case and the conclusion drawn from them are in accordance with something that was drawn to my attention by the chief doctor of our concentration camp. The death rate in the week between Christmas 1944 and New Year's 1945 increased in camp beyond all previous experience. In his opinion, the explanation for this increase did not lie in the harder working conditions or the deterioration of our food supplies or a change of weather or new epidemics. It was simply that the majority of prisoners had lived in the naive hope that they would be home again by Christmas. As the time drew near and there was no encouraging news, the prisoners lost courage and disappointment overcame them. This had a dangerous influence on their powers of resistance, and a great number of them died. We have hope, and that hope is not realized. It doesn't come about. The thing we're hoping for, that hopes can be dashed. It can lead us to despondency, despair, hopelessness, and that can have tragic consequences. Or even in less dire situations, we can hope for things and get all excited about them, and then they don't happen, and then we get really upset, really disappointed, and then we hope again for something else, and then get all excited about it, and then that doesn't happen, and then we get really upset again. And there's this emotional roller coaster that can lead to burnout, that can eventually lead to despondency, cynicism, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of helplessness. And again, we can wind up worse off than we were before we started on that roller coaster going up and down. The first danger of hope is passivity, hoping for something in the future, hoping for someone else to do something, and then not doing the things we need. The second danger is that roller coaster of up and down, and we wind up more emotionally exhausted and spent and feeling despair. That's going to lead to disillusionment, cynicism, pessimism, all of which will lead to inaction. But if we look at the literature on hope, hope has a very positive influence on outcomes. In talking about the need for hope, Viktor Frankl tells this story. He says, "Our senior block warden was a wise man. He talked about the many comrades who had died in the last few days, either of sickness or of suicide. But he also mentioned what may have been the real reason for their deaths, giving up hope. He maintained that there should be some way of preventing possible future victims from reaching this extreme state. And it was to me that the warden pointed to give this advice. God knows I was not in the mood to give psychological explanations or to preach any sermons, to offer my comrades a kind of medical care of their souls. I was cold and hungry, irritable and tired, but I had to make the effort and use this unique opportunity. Encouragement was now more necessary than ever. So I began by mentioning the most trivial of comforts first. I said that even in this Europe, in the sixth winter of the Second World War, our situation was not the most terrible we could think of. I said that each of us had to ask himself what irreplaceable losses he had suffered up till then. I speculated that for most of them, these losses had really been few. Whoever was still alive had reason for hope. Health, family, happiness, professional abilities, fortune, position in society, all these were things that could be achieved again or restored. After all, we still had our bones intact. Whatever we had gone through could still be an asset to us in the future. And I quoted from Nietzsche, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." Then I spoke about the future. I said that to the impartial, the future must seem hopeless. I agreed that each of us could guess for himself how small were the chances of survival. I told them that although there was still no typhus epidemic in the camp, I estimated my own chances about 1 in 20. But I also told them that in spite of this, I had no intention of losing hope and giving up, for no man knew what the future would bring, much less the next hour. Even if we could not expect any sensational military events in the next few days, who knew better than we, with our experience of camps, how great chances sometimes opened up, quite suddenly, at least for the individual? For instance, one might be attached unexpectedly to a special group with exceptionally good working conditions, for this was the kind of thing which constituted the luck of a prisoner. But I did not only talk of the future and the veil which was drawn over it. I also mentioned the past, all its joys, how its light shone even in the present darkness. Again, I quoted a poet to avoid sounding like a preacher myself, who had written, "What you have experienced, no power on earth can take from you." Not only our experiences, but all we have done, whatever great thoughts we may have had, and all we have suffered, all this is not lost. Though it is past, we have brought it into being. Having been is also a kind of being, and perhaps the surest kind. Then I spoke of the many opportunities of giving life a meaning. I told my comrades who lay motionless, although occasionally a sigh could be heard, that human life under any circumstances never ceases to have a meaning, and that this infinite meaning of life includes suffering and dying, privation and death. I asked the poor creatures who listened to me attentively in the darkness of the hut to face up to the seriousness of our position. They must not lose hope, but should keep their courage in the certainty that the hopelessness of our struggle did not detract from its dignity and its meaning. I said that someone looks down on each of us in difficult hours, a friend, a wife, somebody alive or dead, or a God, and he would not expect us to disappoint him. He would hope to find us suffering proudly, not miserably, knowing how to die. And finally, I spoke of our sacrifice, which had meaning in every case. It was in the nature of the sacrifice that it should appear to be pointless in the normal world, the world of material success. But in reality, our sacrifice did have a meaning. Those of us who had any religious faith, I said frankly, could understand without difficulty. I told them of a comrade who, on his arrival in camp, had tried to make a pact with heaven that his suffering and death should save the human being he loved from a painful end. For this man, suffering and death were meaningful. His was a sacrifice of the deepest significance. He did not want to die for nothing. None of us wanted that. What I love about that speech is how ordinary it is. I imagine, if I was in that position, what would I say? That's such an impossible task. But he points to the ordinary. He points to things that are tangible, things that are outside of each person's current experience, their current state, because their current state is miserable. But hope for reunion with someone they love, hope of acting in a way that our loved ones can be proud of, hope of one day drawing on that experience and making it meaningful, like the author does. Viktor Frankl writes about his experience and he renders it meaningful. He is positing himself in the future with the hope that one day he can draw from this experience and make it useful. There's the hope of helping each other. There's the hope of acting in a way that they can be proud of, acting in a way that's in line with their values, their morals, their ethics. This is an active version of hope. This is an engaged version of hope. This is not a hope that's passive at all. This is a hope that is rooted in something they have some control over, their own behavior, their attitudes, their perseverance, not in some external source they can't control. It is also rooted in reality, not fantasy. He says that he thinks he has a 1 in 20 chance of survival. His hope is standing on the harsh reality of his situation, not in denial of his situation. He reminds his fellow inmates of the inherent uncertainty of the future by calling up their own experience of random good things happening. Their fate is not sealed. There is still possibility. And the hope that Viktor Frankl talks about is necessary to survive in those conditions. That's what helps him get through. That's what he saw versions of that helped people endure and persevere under those awful, horrible conditions. What separates out a version of hope that's helpful, that helps sustain life, that helps us persevere, that helps us go on despite setbacks and despite difficulties, versus a version of hope that keeps us passive, or a version of hope that if that thing doesn't happen, then we're crushed, that it suddenly disappears, a weak version of hope, a faulty version of hope. These are crucial questions. These are the questions that we need the answers to. And so this is my thinking of how I'm thinking through this right now, but I encourage you to think of it. Like, are there times in your life that you hoped for something and then it didn't happen and then you were crushed? That was really difficult. Are there times where you hoped for things and there were setbacks, but you kept going, you kept persevering? The setbacks actually didn't deter you from your goal. So the first thing that I can see from my own experience and from my reading is, what are you basing your hope on? Like, what are you resting your hope on? Is that a specific outcome? And if so, that seems very fragile, because especially an outcome you don't have any control over. So that could be a medical diagnosis that you're waiting for, right? You can hope for a certain result, but you really have no control over that. It's either going to be one way or the other, and you don't have control. So if you're hoping for a specific outcome and you don't get that outcome, it can be devastating. The ancient Greeks believed in an unalterable fate. And we saw that to have hope when you cannot control the outcome can only add to your suffering. Likewise, to invest our hope in the actions of others or outcomes we have no control over also can add to our suffering if those things don't come about. In Buddhism, this is the type of hope that they warn against, this grasping, clinging hope, this hope to a specific outcome. That is a fragile hope. So then what are we supposed to hope for then? What are we supposed to base our hope on? And I think the way to think about that is to think about if you want a specific outcome, why do you want that outcome? What are you really hoping for? What's the ultimate goal? And so for a health diagnosis, I think you're hoping for a quality of life. You're wanting a good life. So it makes sense that you would want that means to that end. But if you put your hope instead in that ultimate goal, I want a healthy, meaningful, rich life, then even if you get a diagnosis, right, that can be a serious impediment that can put parameters around that life, but you can still have that life. And if your goal, your hope is for a high quality of life, and you get a bad diagnosis, an unfortunate diagnosis medically, you're going to exercise a little bit more that you can. You're going to eat a little bit better. You can get a little bit more sleep. But if you're hoping for a positive diagnosis, a good diagnosis, and you get a negative one, you might say, to heck with it. You might go to despair, hopelessness. You might then not take care of yourself, which is going to wind up in a worse outcome than if you're hoping for a healthy life where you'll then engage with the diagnosis, engage with your life, and work towards that good outcome. This has to do with means and ends. If you're hoping for a particular means, a particular strategy to be successful, that is more fragile than if you're hoping for this ultimate end, because then that opens up multiple pathways to get to that end. I'm hoping to win the lottery, so I'm going to buy a bunch of lottery tickets, and then if I don't win, I'm going to be really upset, and then I'm going to try again, and then up and down on that roller coaster. But why do I want to win the lottery? And this is hypothetical. I don't want to win the lottery. I want to win the lottery because I want to have enough. I want to have enough food. I want to have education for my kids. I want to have a safe place to live. So though that's the end, to have that quality of life. And so that's a good thing to invest hope in, is that quality of life. And sure, winning the lottery might really help with that, but there are more ways than just that to get to that place you want to be, which is that safety and the feeling of having enough and education for your kids. Hope is a choice. The reason why hope is still in the jar is because we get to choose it. All the other ones, all the things that were let out, the hunger, the famine, the death, the disease, all of that stuff, we don't get to choose any of that. We get to choose hope. Hope is left in there. And so we get to say whether or not we want to pick it up and take it on. And if so, under what circumstances and for what reason. So I'm recommending a wise use of hope, not to get one particular thing, one approach, one strategy, but to light the way, a guiding light towards your ultimate values, to what you really are hoping for, what's your heart longing for. So that's where you lie your hope. And then there's many different means to get to that end. The first question you want to ask yourself is, what effect is this hope having on me? Is it making me passive? Is it making me not do the things I need to do to take care of myself, to take care of my community, to take care of the earth? Or is it making me active? Is it making me engage in my life, engage with other people, engage with the earth? That's the first way you can tell if this hope is a false hope or a potentially good hope. The first criteria is what effect is it having on me? Passivity or action? And so we want hope that leads us to action, to engagement. The second question is this a means? Am I hoping for a means to an end or the end itself? And you want to invest in your hope in the end, the ultimate goal. So one way to discern that is to ask yourself, are there different ways to get to what I'm hoping for? Or is actually what I'm hoping for a way to get someplace else? And so winning the lottery, there aren't multiple ways to get to winning the lottery. Is buy a ticket and that's about it. But living a good life where you have health care and food and shelter and education, there are multiple ways to get there. So what differentiates hope as a blessing from hope as a curse? So one is an action component, that it activates people to engage in their lives. It doesn't make them passive. Two, there's multiple pathways forward. There's multiple pathways to achieve what that person is hoping for. There's not just one. That if you're hoping on one outcome, that's a fragile hope. So hope on something long-term, something more general, something that's an ultimate need, and then there's many strategies to get there. And then three, it involves other people, being connected to other people and communities. How do we cultivate hope? Hope was left in the jar, and it's up to us to pick it up or not. That is a choice that we can make. I'm suggesting we pick up that hope and take it on in a wise way. So an unwise way is to hope for some specific outcome. That is fragile. When you hope for a specific outcome, that's a grasping, that's a clinging, that's a closed fist. Think of it instead as an open hand, open to the possibility. Instead of a hand grasping at the future tightly, trying to force something to happen, trying to will it into existence, think of it as an open hand and a flame burning there, guiding our way. What is that flame? That flame is a future of ultimate good. The flame is a future as an end in itself, to be with that loved one again, to have a rich experience with life, to have a deep connection with someone, to finish that work finally. And if it's a true hope and not a false hope, it calls us, it guides us, it moves us to engage with the world, to engage with others, to engage with the planet. It doesn't make us passive. It leads us into the future with determination and courage and perseverance and endurance. And that hope lights the way, even though it's surrounded by darkness. The darkness is randomness, it's chaos, it's unpredictability, but it's acknowledgement of that. It's not sort of the intellectual arrogance that we know what's going to happen in the future, that pessimistic certainty, that certainty of cynicism. Hope is open to the randomness. It's open to, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I hope it works out well because I've lived through life, and I know that life is kind of chaotic and spontaneous and magical at times and random, and maybe that will work in my favor this time. I'm not going to foreclose possibility, not that I could. I'm going to be open to the reality that there is possibility, that we live in an indeterminate universe. And so that light of hope is going to guide me through that randomness and chaos. And I'm going to join with others to help them have hope if their hope is waning, and to draw from their energy when my hope is waning. Because I know that together we are stronger. Hope implies an agency that I can shape the future. I can make a difference. And when we're together, we have more agency. There's more of us. There's more possibility. And so to join in community and to take care of ourselves. It's hard to have hope when we're tired, we're exhausted, we're overworked. So we need to get our sleep. We need to eat well. We need to take care of ourselves. So we have the energy. When we have the energy, we have agency. When we have agency, then it's easier to have hope. I said at the beginning that I changed my view of hope through this process of bringing these things together and sitting with this and thinking about these things. And by no means is this finished product or as I've tied a bow on it. I wanted to open up possibilities. And for me, when I came into, before I started, I was a hope skeptic. I felt ambivalent about hope. I felt like, well, sometimes it can be helpful, but sometimes it can really dash my hopes on rocks, and it can feel terrible and more painful than before I had hope. But in this process, I've realized that when hope turned to despair for me, or despondency or apathy, I was actually hoping for the wrong thing. I was hoping for that means. It's like, oh, if I get this thing will be the end in itself. It's like I've conflated the end with the means. So when the means didn't work, then I was crushed, if that makes sense. Let me give you an example. During the 2024 election, I hoped for a specific outcome. That outcome did not happen, and I was devastated. It was so upsetting, so painful, dark times, and I'm sure you can relate. A lot of my friends looked at the 2026 election and how that was going to be better. Things will be better then. My fear was that there would be this passivity in this country, that people would just sit around and wait for the next election cycle. And my fear was that might be too late, that there's so much damage that can be done and so much erosion of our democracy and our democratic processes that was not my hope. That was not my hope. Because I feel like that's setting yourself up for another letdown. And that might be a little bit too passive. My hope was that in the suffering that was going to come, and the trauma that's here now, the state violence, the people being ripped away from their children and being sent to countries they've never been to, the violence, the cutting off aid, people dying. My hope is that this will wake people up, that people will see the interconnection, feel the empathy, wake up to how we're all in this together, and we all need to take care of each other. We need to build community. We need an egalitarian, thoroughly democratic, ecological society. And I hope that we can all wake up and work towards that. Now, in that, right, I'm noticing that it includes me. I'm hoping to wake up too. It's not you people out there need to wake up and see what no, I need to take on more responsibility. I need to wake up to my interconnection with all of my neighbors. And it's calling me to action, to actually do that, to engage in the world in a deeper way and on a deeper level. And so I've been doing that. I've been joined a rapid response team to help protect members of our community. I've joined a school patrol to help protect the children and their parents. I mentioned this last time. And in that, I see people waking up. I see people with their orange whistles and their orange armbands, and we're building a community and we're protecting each other. And I see the gratitude of the people walking to school, and it's in the context of this violence and this fear and this terror that the state is imposing upon these good people of our city. But my hope is not rooted in the next election cycle. So I feel like this hope is going to sustain me and help me persevere despite the ups and downs. It's not just every day is this, am we winning? Are we losing? Are we winning? Like, that's not the point. The point is to get to this ecological, democratic, egalitarian society. And that's what I'm working towards, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's what feels good. That's what sustains me. So my action item for you is to take some time and sit down and think about, what do you hope for? And then investigate that hope. Does that hope lead to passivity on your part? And if so, you might want to pick a different one or reframe the hope. Is a hope a means to an end, or is it the ultimate end that you seek? So investigate it and try to get to the point where you're hoping for something that's an end in itself, and that there are many means to get there. And those means engage you more in your relationships, in your community, in the planet, in your life. That's your action item. And then to share that with your Apocalypse pal, or you can go to Substack and subscribe. And then you can post that to our chats. We have chats online. Because I'd love to hear what your hope is and have a conversation about hope in general. And if you changed your feelings about hope at all, as I have. Next week, we're going to talk about how to get more time and energy, something we all need. I'm going to tell you the secret to how I was able to do this podcast when previously I was just feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. That's next time on Resilience in Dark Times. That's our show for this episode. If something resonated with you, please share it with someone you know. Subscribe to Resilience in Dark Times wherever you listen to your podcasts. And visit resiliencindarktimes.com to connect with our community. I'm Michael Glavin. Thanks for being here. Until next time.